All right, everybody, welcome back to Only Negotiations in the News. And we're going to start with a quick Iran war update. Then we'll move into MLB negotiations. And Josh, Gerry, thank you for joining us again.
It's always a
Hi,
pleasure,
Mike.
guys.
Hey, so where do we want to begin on Iran?
Jerry?
Well, Joshua, I was interested to have you flesh out what you were just talking about while we were off camera about what you had heard, how China became or is becoming the winner without firing a shot or having any involvement. I'd like you to pursue that a little bit.
Well, yeah, so I'm happy to talk a little bit about that. I think just to zoom out for 1 second, I think we're clearly at a place where things have degenerated pretty badly. And the question is, what's it going to sort of take to get back to the table here? A question that's always near and dear to my heart, based on the last book I wrote, right? Um, and I do think that the
Hey,
problem
let's get a
is,
plug in for that.
okay.
We're supposed to market. What's the name of the book, Josh? And
It's
where can
called
people
getting
find it?
it's called Getting Back to the Table. 5 steps for reviving stalled negotiations. It's really about failure in negotiation or setbacks. And so how do you actually, when things fall apart, sort of why do they fall apart? What happened, right? And how do you get back to the table? And I
Yeah.
think in this particular instance, there's a couple of key points that I would throw out there for people to consider. The first one is you have to stop negotiating in public. It's a disaster. It never helps, and it boxes you in. So I think there's an element of trying to get the parties that be to put down the social media and to stop. Step one.
Let me pause right there on the topic of stories and negotiations and I guess anything in life. So
Yeah,
many people are out there beating their chest. Look at me, look how great I did. I
yeah,
absolutely, as a trainer, as an instructor, a knowledge transfer person, we can learn so much more from failures than
yeah,
from successes.
yeah,
I would
So
agree.
congratulations on picking that topic. And then
yeah,
yeah, on the topic of social media, I'm convinced that helped Trump tremendously win a second term is being banned from Twitter. I
mhm,
can't tell you how many Republicans during his first term were like, "Would you please shut up?
right.
Stop,
Yeah,
stop with the tweets." Now, I'll give him credit. At his age, to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning, like pounding away at the keyboard, woo,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, he's got a lot of stamina for a man of his age
yeah,
to be doing that. So I'll
yeah,
give him credit for that. But you're absolutely right. You box yourself in. And
yeah,
when I tell people when I'm negotiating, I prefer the German style. I don't. One rule for myself, self-imposed, is I will not lie in a negotiation. So if somebody says, what's the budget, Mike? If I don't want to reveal, if it does not work in my best interest, I can be very direct. I can say, you don't really expect me to tell you that, do you? Like,
mm,
right, and stop it. Like on social media, I'm not going to negotiate this in public. For anybody in the administration on either side to say to the press, hey, I understand you have questions, and I understand I'm a public servant, and you deserve answers. However, it's in all of our long-term best interest if I tell you I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to answer that question. And I've
yeah.
never seen a politician do that.
They haven't
Mike,
they haven't done it that directly. I think they will say, I don't negotiate in public, or I don't think it would be prudent to comment on that and create another additional
Yeah.
problem or challenge, right?
Or they talk around the question and they don't say it's not prudent, which is a
Yeah,
more polite way of saying that. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
Jerry, what were you going to say?
I just wanted to go back to your comment. For me, I ask that question, what's your budget, multiple times a week, probably.
Mhm.
Mm,
And,
You should.
and because that's what I do for a living. And so it's
Well, you're in
surprising how
textiles,
often, yeah,
right? So you
right.
can get the 40 pound or the 36 pound or the
Yeah,
24 pound. There's all sorts of different specifications we can
right,
change.
right. But it's surprising how many times I get an answer. Um, and a lot of times I'm even shocked that I get the answer, although it makes life a lot easier. But you'd think nobody would ever answer that question. And, the guy who asks it all the time, I'm shocked at how often somebody gives me
Well,
a good answer.
let me throw this out.
Most of
When
the
I say I
time.
don't lie, but I use the budget as a if I have the leverage. So if I have a $300,000 budget and I have quotes at 340, 327, and 312, I'm going to talk about the budget all day long. I'm going to say, hey, we're going to blow this project's going to get killed if we can't get under the budget. The budget, the budget, the budget. If I've got quotes at 280, 272, and 265, and a supplier asks me, what's the budget, Mike? I'm going to say, I'm not going to talk about the budget. Let's talk about the value we can negotiate. I'll protect the information because if somebody figures out they're too far below the budget, then all of a sudden they may not negotiate. They might just say, hey, you have our best and final. Let's do this. Now, maybe that's in my best interest, but it's situational on whether I use the budget or not, depending on the leverage it creates or not in a negotiation from a commercial perspective. I do think bad news early is good news. If you're going to quote 1.3 million and I've got a $200,000 budget, hey, let's just go away. This isn't going to work out.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I don't want to get off track, but
Yeah.
it was just that's
Yeah.
a topic near and dear to my heart.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think the other thing is if we look at this scenario, so the reasons why this war happened, have been laid out. They've some of them have changed over time, but we know, for example, right now they're not really closer. First of all, there hasn't been regime change. There hasn't really been anything on the nuclear front. And there's a question about ICBMs and what the status of, they're not decimated because they're firing them, right?
Right. We're still shooting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought we wiped them out in the first
And
3 days.
right. And we've had an added dimension to this problem that didn't exist beforehand, which is the Strait of Hormuz. And Trump is clearly very focused on that and getting that open. Um, Now Iran is talking about sort of quote unquote reactivating the Houthis, um, and potentially trying to shut down the Red Sea, along with so, you're at a place, right? And I think it's an interesting question to ponder and to think about here is, so if you're going to get back to the table, if you're going to try to tackle this, right, where are you starting, right? Sequencing in these kinds of scenarios matters greatly. And I think Trump, because he's so transactional, is going to stay with the Strait of Hormuz until that issue is somehow um, at a place where he's comfortable with it, which means that this could drag on for a while because the Iranians have clearly come to the conclusion that there's not a ton that the United States is going to do about this.
Right.
They're going to, right? Been these skirmishes and things along those lines. So whatever leverage existed doesn't exist anymore from a negotiation point of view. I mean, if it does exist, you'd have to say that Iran probably has some leverage here, and that they know that they've successfully been able to push back these other issues because of what's gone on with the Strait.
Right. But here's what I don't understand. I mean, there's only so many drones. I know they're super cheap and they're effective. But there is a limited supply that's out there. So eventually Iran will diminish their inventory. Although it's interesting, you can just strike and then, so quickly, so
Yeah.
rapidly. But if I'm Spain, someone who has taken a move against the United States and not letting the military bases fly over the airspace
Yeah.
and stuff like that, what's to stop me, Spain, from saying to Iran, hey, listen, let our ships through. You can hit other ships, that is what it is, but we're choosing to be neutral, or we're choosing actually to be an adjutant against the US. So
Mhm.
don't fire on our ships. And then France can say, hey, well, we don't want you to fire on our ships either. And Germany can say, yeah, us either. And enough countries of the world get together and just say, hey, listen, we're not shooting at you. So stop shooting at our vessels that are coming through. I haven't heard that be proposed by any country that's out there. Is there a reason why? What am I missing?
Well, I mean, the only answer that comes to mind in terms of what another dimension to the conversation might be is that the US has their blockade. The question of how effective it is or not is up for grabs here, right? But the United States might in that scenario might say, yeah, we're not letting you through. Now, that means the United States takes on a different role here, right?
Yeah.
It certainly has a reputational dimension, but I think Trump, I mean, my sense would be that he wouldn't hesitate to say, yeah, you're not going through. And that would
Okay,
have
so
an impact.
does it have to be a back channel negotiation where Spain calls up and says, "Hey, listen, just we're not going to do this in public,
Yeah.
but make sure that our vessels get through because we're being an adjutant against the United States, not allowing them to use our bases. So, if you're going to fire at anybody, don't fire at us. Um, or how
Well,
dare you
again,
fire at us?
I'm,
Any of the vessels have been shot at, but like,
yeah.
how come those countries haven't sent in troops to defend their sovereign property?
I mean, I think the Iranians might well see it as a way of continuing to drive a wedge between the US and their former allies or sort of teetering allies, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it would go anywhere because, like I said, I have a feeling I'm fairly certain Trump would say, "Well, you're going to end up in a blockade, and your ships aren't going to be able to go through." Again, that would certainly have a reputational dimension to it that would be a problem.
Yeah.
Uh, but look, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the United States is having a slow, steady falling out with its European allies. I'm hearing more and more conversation about, sort of NATO and other entities moving forward really without the United States because they don't feel like the US is a reliable partner. And they're becoming, more clear in their minds that they're going to have to do this on their own. It's, on some level.
Yeah.
And that's not a small change. I mean, it's a massive change. But I think they're also very clear in their minds that, look, like the US just isn't a reliable partner right now. So what do we do? Like, we've got to look out for our own interests, right? And I think what countries seem to be doing is they seem to be exercising their BATNA. They're going elsewhere slowly but surely. They're not necessarily being vocal. And by the way, Jerry, this takes us back to China, because I think what you're seeing slowly over time is the Chinese are reducing their dependency wherever they can on the United States and cutting deals with South Korea and Canada and other places and European countries, as part of this process.
Yeah.
I think why I think China ends up being a bit of a winner out of all this is, that they've been clear that they would like the United States influence in the Middle East to be lessened. And I think it
Sure.
has become as a result of this. Um, I think that, countries again are also beginning to look to China. Um, and with all of these actions, the dollar, which was the linchpin of the global economy, is now in question. And the Chinese are stepping in like they do. They step in where there's a void. And there's a void right now of leadership and things along those lines and influence, and et cetera. And so I think there's a lot of pieces here, and they've continued to be able to get the vast quantities of their oil from Iran, whether it's over land or there were apparently, I think I heard it was about 20 billion barrels of oil that had gotten out during the the ceasefire. And the Chinese have also been preparing for this kind of thing, and have really ramped up renewable energies and other kinds of things to the point where they're becoming a global leader in windmill creation and solar and all of these other dimensions. But they've been prepping for a time like this where they're continuing to reduce their dependency.
Mm.
And so I think
Well,
all
they
of
have
those
to.
things, yeah, good.
They have to because they don't have any coal or oil on their own. So, I mean, they have no choice. I mean, and I guess I don't blame them.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
So I think, I guess if we just go back and maybe try to put an interim bow on this conversation about, can they get back to the table? I think that this is a very challenging scenario, and all of these other issues that began this war are going to be pushed well back um, in terms of order of addressing these challenges. I think this negotiation we'll continue to focus on the Strait of Hormuz. And the question is, what are you going to do differently? Like, how is this going to end up? Because, to me, part of what I get at the book is to say, look, your process failed for a reason. So how are you going to look at what happened and do something different to get back to the table in a unique and different way? Right? That's one of the core questions that I think negotiation parties need to ask themselves when they're stuck like this is what do we do differently? Like what didn't work and what could work, to get us back on
Well,
track.
that assumes they have the self-intelligence, self-awareness to realize they were a part of the failure. There, there
Indeed.
are there are certain people who are never a part of a failure. They
Right.
what me?
Yeah, of course not. Right, exactly. That's true. And it's interesting you say that, Mike, because the vast majority of the framework that I lay out in the book is actually really turning the mirror on yourself and saying, what did I do? What was my contribution to this? How can I, again, think about this, not let some of the heuristics and other kinds of things that guide my negotiation approach get in the way. And I think you're exactly right that I think one of the things that's happening is that the parties on each side have their way of negotiating, right? Trump has one approach, the Iranians have another. The Iranians aren't going to change right now because they look at this and they say, this is working for us. And Trump isn't going to change and take a more collaborative approach because that's not what he does.
Right.
He attempts to use maximum force all the time. And when you're in a scenario like he is right now, it isn't going to work. So someone's going to have to do something different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the
Well, the
description.
way I see it is
Oh, sure.
that Trump and the IRGC, who I really think is the
Yeah.
pulling the levers here, they're both the same. I mean, in their kind of their approaches and thought, they're both very strongly. They have very strong beliefs, and they're going to go to the grave fighting for those beliefs. And it's like then they don't care what the casualties are. It's
They're going
these
to
are
be
like
martyrs
two.
in Iran.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
And,
so
yeah.
I really in some way fear what's going to happen because, both Trump and I'm a Trump guy, I'll admit it. But, I see they're both strong-willed people that are going to fight tooth and nail into the death. And Trump knows he's not up for re-election. And I don't think he cares much about, what happens after his term. But by golly, he's going to, stick it to Iran and the Iranians kind of feel the same way. So
Do
I
you
think a
guys
lot more
think that
damage is going to be done.
remember when Trump was running that it was out there that there was a hit squad from Iran
Mhm.
that was targeting him in an additional assassination attempt on top of the two that was out there. Do you
Sure.
Yeah.
think that Trump took it seriously and took it personal and this is a oh yeah, you think you're going to hit me? I mean, he already took out their one leader. He didn't take the regime out, but he's making hits on their leadership. Do you think that it's a personal vendetta at that?
I think
I
it
mean,
could be part of it
well,
anyway.
I think he has a knack for making most things personal, and finding a way of saying this clearly is. But I mean, I think in this instance, sure,
I mean, if somebody were
absolutely,
I
yeah. If somebody's
negotiated with a
trying to
hitman
kill
one
me,
time.
then but it's interesting because he did come out, I think, a week or two ago and basically say, if I were to be assassinated, hell and fury would fall on the Iranians and stuff like that. I mean, slightly ironic because you killed their leader, but that's
Right.
that was okay, but this isn't, and I just think that in this instance you're at a crossroads, and I think you're right, Mike. The problem is that if you're going to get back to the table, if you're going to find a new way, there has to be a modicum of humility to say, I got to do something different. And and you're right, Gerry. I think both sides are sort of looking at it and saying, yeah, I don't think so. And I don't know if you guys heard the story, but the New York Times released a story yesterday about how the Israelis had um, tried to groom Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, to take over if the US and Israel had been
Oh yeah,
successful in
yeah.
eliminating the regime. And the story is quite fascinating. If folks haven't heard it, the lengths that they went to try to line this up um, were quite interesting. And I mean, Ahmadinejad was, virulently anti-Semitic and everything like that. So I don't know exactly what they must have seen something as part of this process. But it's definitely one of those where you're like,
All right.
wow, what you're trying to put together is, let's just say, from a percentage chance, like maybe 10% to have the kind of
Hey,
regime change. Put
don't
him
put
in,
anything past the
think that,
Israelis. They
yeah,
did that thing with the pagers. That was a
right.
long
Yeah,
play,
right.
right? To get the supply chain. I'm a supply chain guy. To get the supply chain set up, to get all the parts moving, all the shell businesses, to
Yeah,
get them to buy the pagers, to
right.
get those pagers to the right people. Ooh, the
Yeah,
the
yeah,
intellect, the planning, and then to keep it a secret
yeah.
until I mean, the Israelis have a formidable force in their intellectual property in their intelligence community.
But I think, in an instance like this, right? I think what you're hoping for, because right now, what you have is extreme active efforts at distrust, right?
Yeah.
Like that is actually what's transpiring. It's not as if there's any trust at all. And it's very hard to imagine how they would create any trust at this point. I mean, they're basically both sides are taking actions that are actively seeking to create distrust. So they're partly cutting the negotiation process off. And it right now seems to me like it's a battle for leverage. And
With
then the
Trump, it
question is,
always is about the leverage,
right.
right?
But I think the Iranians are looking at this and going, you know what? We have the leverage over the strait. Um, there's not a whole lot the US can do. And so, I mean, it's certainly taking its toll on their economy as well,
Yeah.
right? But but they're playing the long game, right?
And
Because
they're true
again,
believers. They're in
yeah,
martyrdom. I mean,
Oh,
so
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, all right.
Well,
Well,
hey,
I
do you
don't know
guys think
why.
one
I'm
component
gonna.
of this? Do you think there's a back channel going on? There's the public stuff, and there's the Trump Vance
Yeah.
like this is what we're doing, saying,
yeah.
and then there's Kushner. I haven't heard his name for a while, but he's up to something. Is he making some things happen back channels with are they in Jordan sitting down at a table, cooler heads prevailing from that perspective?
I don't think there's any question they are. I don't know. I would doubt it's Kushner. It's probably some other career diplomats that are trying to
Okay.
quietly shuffle this along. But absolutely, even though they're not seasoned diplomats in the traditional sense, I think they understand that. And this happened, it does happen all the time where these official processes are, more show than anything, and that there's a lot of back channel stuff through interlocutors and others that are there. So absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Well, I have always thought, could China play a role in a guarantor of peace in this situation? Um, and I got to think, Trump claims he's got a great relationship with Xi.
Mhm.
Is there a way that China could play a role in, somehow settling this whole thing? And I'm not thrilled about having China involved at all for a lot of
Yeah.
reasons. However, there may be a very legitimate role for China to be involved in this as kind of a guarantor of peace, however that might be constructed. Just Jerry's
I
thoughts.
think I think they're honestly the only one actually that could, because they have the economic clout, and they have other ability. I mean, they have,
Yep.
pretty close ties with Iran. And as you said, Jerry, Trump fashions himself to be a friend, colleague, whatever of Xi. So, and to me, that would be the smart move here to break the deadlock, would be to try to bring in a Xi to say, look, guys, like, let's try to sort this out. Certainly, let's try to sort out the Strait of Hormuz piece of this. They might say the rest of it's on up to you guys to figure out, but like, let's try to manage that so the global economy doesn't hit a massive tailspin.
Yeah. And I've heard that Xi is also a narcissist, doesn't like bad news, that his people are afraid to tell him anything wrong with the Chinese economy, right? And when he goes places, everything is perfect. So maybe there's an ego play there as well that says
Good
you could
point.
be the
Yeah.
peacemaker of the world, Xi. If you could
Mhm.
pull this off, you'd look really good.
Yeah,
I know he looks good anyway on a relative basis, but
yeah,
certainly there could be an ego play there.
yeah.
Oh, how about
Good
this?
point.
Hey, Xi, don't you want to win the Nobel Prize for peace? What?
Mhm.
Oh,
Or
that would
maybe,
send
or
Trump.
maybe that, maybe
Boom.
that. maybe the next FIFA prize for peace goes to him.
See, FIFA played that so well. I thought from just creating leverage, creating relationships, FIFA's like, hey, we're gonna give you this. Hey, they went down to the store. They're like, hey, give us the nice trophy. No, not the plastic one. Give us
Yeah,
the
you got to
really good
pay
one.
up for that. It's going to
Right,
cost you $100.
right. And they got and his name engraved on the bottom. And then they were like, hey, listen, look, then we're gonna give you this award to start us off.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
then Trump couldn't help himself with the red card thing and getting involved. And I don't think
Got
there was a
it.
negotiation per se, but I think it was all a relationship play. Then FIFA
Yeah.
will, be on good terms and get to do what they
Yeah.
want.
Yep.
All right, well, let's wrap this up then, and let's shift into the Major League Baseball part of the show, shall we say? Josh, why don't you cue it up for us?
Well, look, I think, like most negotiations, this started with a proposal. And the challenge with this proposal is it's a refashioning of how baseball has done everything they've done to date.
Mhm.
And they are the one sport that doesn't have some kind of hard cap. We have seen teams who don't care, to be very frank, right?
Yeah.
Oops. And so, the notion of the Dodgers or the Yankees or even my Red Sox or whomever, the Mets, right? Um, Having to pay extra. I mean, when they have these massive, media contracts and others, they don't care about
They'll
that.
just change
Um,
their jerseys to try to make some more money. Those
yeah,
yellow,
absolutely. And
come on, Boston,
it works
that yellow
beautifully in
stuff,
Boston. Yeah, you got it. I mean, we've got our Green Monster
it's like banana
hats and
ball.
jerseys and yeah. But I think what makes this negotiation difficult is that they're trying to change the lands. It's a structural change to baseball. So this is not a haggling kind of thing. It's not like we're going to propose to a cap of 300 million and then the players are going to say 500 million and you're going to land somewhere in between. I don't think that's what's going to get it done. I think what they have to do is they have to reimagine how they could do this and what that might mean because the Players Association has so much leverage. What it might mean, as you know, is to get creative and to say, for example, like what if the owners said, look, we'll increase the amount of money that the players get from the revenue pool. We might even put aside, 1% of ownership in our team for former players. I don't know, right? But my point is that I think this is the kind of negotiation that's going to require creative thinking and doing things very differently than just simply like let's put out a proposal, let's haggle back and forth and see what happens because I don't think that's going to get anywhere.
Okay, so
And by the way, one other quick thing and then I'll
yeah,
stop. There has to be a cap. There's no question about that. But I think the other part of Major League Baseball and the problem with baseball is the floor. Um, there are lots of, small market teams, the A's, the Rays, the Twins, the Royals, that don't spend, and their owners are taking the revenue and tossing it into their pocket. So there
yeah.
has to be a floor in addition to a ceiling so that at least teams are spending, you know, in the same realm. Like if you could get it within $50 million of a payroll between all of the teams, one would argue that's a success, right? Something like that. I don't know. But I do think that it in my mind, like this is the kind of scenario where you have to say, okay, like if we're not going to agree to what all the other sports have, and frankly, the NFL, I think, is the model for this because the NFL has such good revenue sharing and the bigger teams basically agreed for the betterment of the league to do things differently.
Mhm.
And I think that's the difference between football and baseball. And look at what's happening with football. Football's exploded because there is parity. And I believe there were 21 teams that were still in contention for the playoffs in the last 2 weeks of the season last year in the NFL. Something crazy like that, where it was the epitome of parity, right? It's like this is exactly what you want as a league. And I think nobody on the owner side or on the player side is saying what is best for baseball. And they're certainly not saying it, from a fan point of view, because we're continuing to pay more and more to go to a game,
And
right?
they're empty stadiums.
Yeah.
Maybe in Boston you're selling them out, but when I
Well, we are
turn on
now
the
after
game,
winning 13 in a row. Yes.
yeah, there you go. The
I had to
bandwagon
squeeze
Yeah,
that
jumper.
in.
at the
I had to
expense of the
squeeze that
White Sox on several of those too recently.
in. So I just, to me, that's like, I think you have to kind of come at this differently and say, like, we can't haggle and bargain in a typical kind of way. I mean, that's what, if somebody said, what would you do with this? That, like, I'd say, let's really try to think about this differently and be creative.
Well, and luckily
Well, here's
there are sports
I
to look
would
at like NFL. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jerry.
I agree with what you've said, Joshua. But the interesting thing about this to me
Hmm.
is that Trump has decided to get involved, which, as I said, I'm a Trump guy, but
Hmm.
I don't think I would prefer not to see him involved in this. I think it's best keep politics out of it, let the parties negotiate. If they come up with a good deal, a bad deal, it should be completely outside of politics or pressure from the president of the United States, whoever the president is. So that to me, that's the story to me is like, why did he do this? To make this even more difficult than it's going to be, because it's going to be difficult. As you said, this is baseball. I mean, this is historic history. And
Right.
to change it's going to be hard. So I just shook
I'm
my
against
head.
them
It's
even
like this.
having
Yeah.
the winner of any, championship at the White House. It's like, don't you guys have enough like real work to do? Or why are we like it's a dog and pony show? So for me, no matter what politician's in office, less politics in and let businesses, we like to say we're capitalists, but we're really not. It's corporatism that we've got. I think
Yeah.
the free market is the freer the market is, less bound by politicians, the better the result will be. Um, for all of us as consumers, if we as consumers are intentional and vote with our wallets and to say I'm going to go see these teams because I like the way they operate, and I'm not going to go see those teams. I grew up in Detroit, and God bless my Detroit friends. They just keep thinking this is the year. It's like no, the Lions in a league built to go 8-8 and make the playoffs every other year. There are certain franchises, Cleveland, that it's a horrible moving the Raiders to Vegas. Oh Jesus, that's just a. There's certain dumpster fires that are out there that and then people need to stop paying out all that money for those season tickets when there's not a winner on the field and there's no hope to have a winner. I've got us on the NFL track. Let's go back to MLB. Okay, so what are you thinking,
Oh,
Josh, structurally? Oh, is
I
he
think
frozen?
Joshua froze.
Oh, here he is. He's back.
Oh,
Oh,
Coming
all
back
right.
in. All right. So I guess good. I had sidetracked us with NFL stuff. So let's go back to MLB. What's the structural changes that you see? Because we've got players and their self-interest is my career for the next. And the good news in baseball is you can have a 20-year career, maybe not have a good 15-year run. It's not like the NFL where you have that. What's the average is like 5.5 years, but you
Yeah.
can have a 15-year run. That's why a lot of guys go into baseball. If they can, and they're getting what, $250 million. Some of the top guys. Um,
Mhm.
so their self-interest is strong to not have a cap, to
Yeah.
let the market
yeah.
bear what the market will bear. But then you get the bottom feeders, the guys who are just making it out of AAA, and they want to get a little bit more.
Right.
Um, you got the owners, the big market owners versus the small market owners. You got a lot of competing factions. How are they going to get all those people to the table and have this is the plan we should follow type discussions?
Yeah, you do. And I think it starts with this question of like, I mean, in the end, what is it you want? I mean, do you want a Dodgers team that's going to win 5 World Series in a row? Like, is that what you're looking for? Or do you want to have teams that across the country, regardless of where they are, have the ability to compete every year? They're not going to win every year, of course, but can they compete, right? Can you create a system? I mean, look, a lot of these contracts in baseball, right? These 12, 13, 14, 15-year contracts are crazy, right? And what you're seeing actually with a lot of them is that they don't really bear out. Um, take the Mets. I mean, Francisco Lindor's got an onerous contract to the point where they're not going to be able to trade him. Um, Juan Soto's contract is, crazy. I mean, right up there in, I think they're second in Major League Baseball in overall payroll, and they're having a miserable season.
Right. And
So
if they let him go, the fan base would be like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you let him go." Well,
yeah.
sometimes you
So I
don't want the highest payroll.
mean, so I mean, the first thing is, again, like it's there, this question about a cap, right? And look, I think to your point, Mike, I mean, there are the 25, 30, 40 guys in Major League Baseball who are going to make so much money this doesn't matter to, right? But then there's the average guy, and it does matter. And I, I I'm I don't know if you guys heard the stories, but Rob Manfred went last summer and started to pitch this idea and went to different clubhouses and went into the Phillies clubhouse, and Bryce Harper was like, um, don't bring any conversation in here about a cap or anything like that. We're not willing, we're not interested. And he had a bat in his hand pointing it at him, in a kind of threatening kind of way. So again, I mean, I come back to this point that baseball is at a place where even though it's doing okay, right, it's not sustainable. It won't be. And there are so many teams that are not going to compete. And so unless you change the way you do something, um, it will be the same, 7 to 10 teams every year, with every third or fourth year the Rays sneak in or the Royals sneak in or whatever, right? But then they have to blow it up and start over again. I mean, I tend to have the most respect for the general managers of these small teams who find a way to compete and have a massive, um,
Moneyball.
yeah, Moneyball. I mean, that's
Little
exactly
pool of
it,
money,
right?
and you got to spend it wisely.
And you have to do things differently. Like,
And
and
yeah,
so, but there were a couple of proposals. I mean, one was that, the other was to reduce the draft to 20 rounds.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, it is 20 rounds right now, but I think it was to reduce it actually further to 12, if I remember
12. Yeah.
correctly. Yeah.
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 12.
There's a question about why. I think in part they're trying to actually encourage guys to go to college, and to get development in college. If you look at the latest Major League Baseball draft that just happened 10 days ago, there were far more college players drafted this year than high school players. And I think teams are beginning to realize that the jump from high school to the pros is significant, and that um, you know guys that go to college are much more major league ready. Um,
Think about
and
the
so trying,
body. That going
yeah,
from 18 to 22 with
right,
a professional dietitian and a trainer,
right,
you're going to be just that much better. And
yeah,
even like the training you get, like the eyeball training, the fast to pick up what the pitch is going to be. I
right.
would make the argument. Now they're probably doing that in the minor leagues, but why not let the colleges pay for that with NIL?
Well,
To go
that's
back
it.
to another topic.
And I think the NIL piece of this is part of the equation, that I think Major League Baseball has looked at it and said, look, we can, I mean, I think there is an economic dimension to that decision. And I think it's partly because they're saying, okay, like with the NIL money, let's let the colleges develop these guys as opposed to the pros. Like, reduce our, need for all of the developmental stuff. I mean, it will happen, but there's a way in which it can happen differently.
Well, look at the NFL, right?
Yeah,
There is no minor league. The NFL just lets
right.
college
Yeah,
take it and run with
right.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My dad's making the argument for years that the NFL should be paying for both high school and college programs because they get an
yeah,
automatic, preconditioned athlete with a name behind them, and then all they have to do is put them on the field.
yeah.
Um,
That's right. Yeah. And then, I mean, the last dimension of the proposal is the international draft, and actually creating much more of a structured draft, which I actually think, and again, this comes back to parity, because let's just take the Yankees for a minute, not that because I'm a Red Sox fan, but partly because I'm a Red Sox fan. The Yankees have scouts in Panama, Venezuela, Colombia, Puerto Rico, whatever. In every country, Puerto Rico being
sure.
essentially a satellite of the United States. But the point is, the Yankees have a scout in each of those places. The smaller market teams do not. They will have a Latin American scout, right? Or a South American, so whatever it might be. So again, you're back to parity. I actually think, and I think that to me, that should be one that I would imagine, um, I think would be a positive change because I do think it would level the playing field a little bit more, where you limit the draft. It's much more structured as opposed to going in now and signing a 12-year-old kid and giving him $10,000, who a kid in the Dominican, $10,000 is a
Life
huge amount of
changing.
money.
Yeah.
And it's nothing to
Yeah.
the Yankees or the Mets or the Dodgers or whomever. So it's been that structure has been a wild west. And I think bringing that in, I think would be productive
But
and
now you're
helpful.
talking about, so the owners, strong owners, now all of the owners giving up control of drafted players. Basically, you're giving more free agents more power if you don't draft them and put the handcuffs on them. So all the owners would have to give up control to the players, more players for that, from a leverage perspective,
Mhm.
future leverage. And then you've got the fight between the big groups like the Yankees and the smaller markets who can't
Yeah.
afford or won't afford to do all that. So you got the big owners
Mhm.
giving up twice power to players and power to other ownership groups by doing that. I,
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
why do the Yankees want to do that? Why does
They
Boston
don't.
want to do that?
They won't. They won't want to, but I think it comes down to, I mean, I feel like there's somebody that needs to be sitting on the balcony as part of this negotiation saying, guys, like what's happening is not sustainable. You have to change. Otherwise, there won't be a baseball in the way that,
Why do you
you know,
say that it's not sustainable? Give me a metric that is in such decline that it's off a cliff and they're going to somebody's going to go out of business. Somebody's going to go bankrupt. Like didn't Bush he even saved the Rangers right from bankruptcy, right? Or had them in
yeah.
bankruptcy.
Look, I mean, well, he did, I believe, yes. I mean, I think if you were to look at the popularity of sports in the United States, right? I think right now there's no question that NFL is vastly more popular than any other sport.
Mhm.
I believe basketball is second and then baseball. I think the
Mm.
changes that have been made by Rob Manfred, you know, whether people like him or not, baseball purists don't. But to be very honest, like the pitch clock, the the pitch reviews, all of those things, people are saying, you know what, in the end, this was a good idea. And for the casual fan, they're going to watch a 2.5 hour game. They're not going to watch a 4 hour game. The
Right,
three of us might because we're baseball fans.
right,
But for the average fan to go to a game, like my wife would be like, I'll go for 2.5 hours. If this thing is going to drag on for 4 hours, forget it, right?
right.
So those changes have been good. I still think that, I mean, again, we could look at the numbers, ratings, and things along those lines, but I still think that people get tired of seeing the same teams over and over again. And again, you have a vast disparity that is creating. So even though it's no panacea to win a World Series if you spend a lot of money, it certainly gets you into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And there's only so, I mean, I was out in Kansas City, okay,
Much of the
in
Mets.
yeah, well, right. But and that's the anomaly, right? Because you're just whatever, for whatever reason it's not working. But like I was out in Kansas City, went to a couple of Red Sox games, and there were 7, 8, 9,000 people there, right? It's so the I think the point is in these small market teams that are struggling to compete and struggling to do things, it's not going to get better.
Yeah. Well, I'm here
And
in Colorado, and the weather is fantastic, and you get a mountain view. I mean, there's
yeah.
all the things from a infrastructure perspective to make it a really enjoyable day, and nobody goes because the team sucks.
That's it. And so I think I think that is the challenge. Now again, you'd have to look more at data, et cetera, to really sort of say, okay, like where can you make these changes? But look, I don't think there's anybody that looks at the structure of baseball and says it's fine. They don't, because it's not fine. Like people at least intuitively understand that when you have these massive disparities in terms of payroll, it's going to have an impact.
Yeah.
And so over time, the bigger market teams don't care, but there is a what's the health of the sport, right? And I think that from a negotiation point of view, like there's three parties at the table, whether the owners and the players like it or not. And the third party is the fans, because we are the ones that are funding this. If fans basically said, "Hey, I'm done spending $250 on a ticket to go to a game," like it would force something, right? And
Yeah.
maybe a lockout is what's needed to get them to say, we're going to have to, instead of a $300 million contract, you're going to get 275. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I'd put with the media, with the fans, I'd put the media in there, or maybe even a separate constituent,
hmm
because
Well, and
that's
they're a
direct
direct
funding.
player
Yeah.
because of how much money they
Yep.
spend,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Right. Exactly.
with
Stadium
right.
rights. And
Yeah.
look what happened with FIFA. FIFA is so strong in their negotiations. They came in and said, take the names off, or you don't get us. We're not bringing our game to you if
Yeah.
you won't take your names off. And then Levi, you're brilliant. Like they covered the Levi name with the Levi, red
Yeah.
tag. Somebody in marketing, it's not a stretch. They weren't working really hard on that idea, but creatively they lived by the letter of the contract,
Yeah.
but still got their brand out there. But you're right. The fans 250 is important, but the Levi 250 million to the stadium rights is important as well.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
lived in Detroit, I remember they got the new ballpark, and Comerica was going to buy the rights, and Comerica had been sponsoring on the local radio stations ads, and they were going to stop advertising on the local stations because they bought the naming rights to what had been Tiger Stadium. So
hmm
then the radio station said, "Oh yeah, well we're going to say, instead of saying Comerica Park, we're going to say come on down to the ballpark." And then that got, I guess, written into the contract that by agreement, the Tigers negotiated with the advertising rights or the game rights that any station that broadcast a Tigers game had to say Comerica Park, not come on down to the ballpark. So you're right. There's the multi parties that get involved here. That it's a big money game. The question is who's going to blink and who can afford to lock out the longest.
Well, right. And I'll give you a quick example of what I mean by like creativity. So I have a friend who I've worked with and known for a while, and his son, really interesting, brilliant guy. He created like this insurance scenario with minor league baseball players.
Okay.
And what he did was he created an entity where minor league baseball players could buy into this entity, okay? And they would agree to give up 10% of their salary annually to this entity. And it was, um, and so like we know that the vast majority of minor league baseball players are not going to make it to the majors, right? So let's say that Aaron Judge bought into this thing, right? So he says, "All right, well, yes, I think I'm going to make it, but I don't know. But like, let me buy into this thing and hedge my bets, right?" So he goes in and he loses 10% of his 350 million or whatever his contract is, right? And that money gets distributed to all of these players who bought into it as a way,
Okay.
it's a way of sort of them recognizing that, hey, as much as I'm obviously a good baseball player, I wouldn't got drafted and I wouldn't be in the minors, but the chances of me making it to the majors, are slim. And so like it's that kind of thinking that I think is really interesting. And I think it's the kind of thing to me that you're gonna need to get over the hump of, because the positions right now are cap or no cap,
Yeah.
right? So you have to move away from a positional negotiation and say, well, what's really driving you? Is it the money? Is it risk? Is it like long-term care? Like what if you were to say like the NFL did with former players, right? Like that we're going to create health insurance policies for you guys going forward, whatever it might
Yeah.
be. I think there's a lot of things to use to try to move, but if they just stay in the cap, no cap, right? We're at a traditional zero sum negotiation that isn't going to go anywhere.
Right. We have to grow the pie as big as possible for there to be more money to split up. And if we're going to argue over the fixed pie,
Right.
it is what it is, but it's positional. And, there's 50-50, there's 55-45, there's only so many ways to split that revenue up. But how do we make more revenue?
Right.
Well, I hope
And
one of the
yeah,
ways is not to expand. I think
Yeah.
there's probably plenty, hopefully some genius doesn't say, oh, we need another four teams or six, whatever.
Yeah,
I
I think
think
the
I'd rather
32
see a
model
reduction in teams,
is
be honest.
the 32 is it just works out so many ways for the mathing of playoffs and size of cities and yeah, I think everybody got to 32 and I think they're gonna
I hope
I think
so.
there's a lot of pots of money here to talk about, right? I mean, you have ticket revenue, you have player like merchandise revenue, you
jersey
have
sales, yeah.
yeah, like there's a lot of different pots of money here, and like sorry, but there's a way in which you could do this where people end up with enough money for their families and their families' families and their families' families from a player point of view that, says, hey, okay, like, we're getting paid very well to play a game, and that's great. And I'm not begrudging people, but I'm also saying, hey, there's also this other dimension that somebody needs to be looking out for the health of the sport. And I
The
think
commissioner is
like
supposed to do that, by the way, right?
yeah, and he is like, and that's why he's unpopular because because he's floating ideas, and the players are saying, these are whatever, these are, un-American, or these are unfair, or these are, not, run against capitalistic principles. I mean, again, like, how much resources do you need where somebody says, hey, if we don't do this, like, the disparity will continue to grow,
Yeah,
and we're ultimately all going to lose out, and I think that is the sort of dimension here that is, and like I said, the NFL owners, I mean, there were a number of different dimensions to what they agreed to, where they agreed to do this kind of revenue sharing and other aspects that have leveled the playing field, where, Jerry Jones and Robert Kraft and others and the Maras could have said, no, we're big market teams and we want to keep all that money. And they didn't. And they didn't because they knew it would be bad, really bad for the NFL. And
yeah.
they've been proven right. And they've, that's an instance where all boats rose, and they really did. So I think the people involved in these negotiations have to, try to play a different game, because they're not going to get anywhere by just going back and forth from a positional point of view, which I think
Right. But
a lot of the
I
time
can't blame
is
the
what's been
players because
required.
they do have a short, even it might be a 15-year window, a 10-year window, but they have a career window and that's it. They make all their money. There's the pitch guys who, sell beds and stuff like that. Tom Brady, I don't know what he's doing, schlocking beds.
Yeah.
But you get it that they're in commercials. Like maybe it's easy, it's too easy money to pass up at that point. But there's
Yeah.
fewer of those guys, so they got to make their money at that time. And do they
Mhm.
care about the next generation of players? They got to go get theirs because I got to get mine now in this window in this contract.
Mhm. Yeah.
Whereas an owner, okay, there's the money you make today, but the real money is when the franchise sells. And
Right.
was it Seattle? What was what just I forget
The
which franchise up
Seahawks.
there.
The
Yeah. What
Seahawks.
how much was that? A $12 billion deal? It was a
Yeah.
big number for Seattle. Yes, they won the Super Bowl, but they're not Dallas. They're not New York. They're not Boston. Um, whew, I can't even imagine what the valuation of the Patriots is after a Seahawk sale like that.
Yeah, I'm curious. But it's 9.6 billion is what it sold for.
Mm.
Um,
So you can't tell
but
me the Patriots aren't worth double that.
well, I'm sure
Just from
they're
a
worth.
prestige perspective.
But do you know what the average salary of a Major League Baseball player is?
What?
Do you have a guess?
No, $1.2 million.
Almost $5.5 million.
5.5.
The
So
average?
that's the average salary for a Major League Baseball, not
Okay,
minor league.
what's median?
Guys in the majors, the average.
What?
Now, again, it's probably getting skewed a bit because of some of the massive contracts, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's the average, right? But so okay, $5.5 million a year for even 5 years, 6 years is more than enough to solidify your future, right? So again, like that's
Is it,
where
John? The concept of enough when it's how many times
it
have you gone into a marina and somebody's got a big boat and then somebody comes in with a bigger boat and everybody goes, "Oh,
no,
look at the bigger."
well, you're leaving, you're highlighting that this isn't just about money. It's about valuation. It's about how people see me, right? This is the competition with NFL quarterbacks. I want to be the highest paid quarterback, right? For 12 minutes until the next guy's contract comes up, and then he's the highest guy. But look, I don't know, maybe I'm old school, but I think I could live pretty well off $20 million over
Oh yeah.
after 4 years. Right? Now, again, like I get it. It's an industry and you get what you can get. But there is this sort of superordinate goal here of how does this sport continue on into the future in a good way? Um, and I think the only person that is charged with, is the commissioner, and he's going to get it from both sides because he's probably going to be putting things forward that,
Yeah.
hedge.
So as it relates
Um,
to business, I've heard this saying that it's a good deal if both sides are equally unhappy with the deal. And I'm
yeah,
like, yeah, I think that's a little lazy. I think there is a way that each side can get wins out of the deal, be happy. Both sides can
yeah,
be happy with the deal, maybe on
yeah.
different deal points. But I think you're right. In this case, I think everybody has to have some shared pain for the greater good for all the participants.
I mean, yeah, that's very likely, right? Except if you think about things differently. Like if you were to look at all of the pots of money and say, okay, right now, here's how we're looking at these resources. Like, how do we look at this differently? Where are these places to grow? I mean, if you come up with a formula that fundamentally changes baseball, right? And makes teams more competitive, what does that mean? It means more people are going to come to the ballpark. It means more people are going to spend money on shirts and merchandise and all of these other kinds of things. It means more people are going to be watching, so media contracts go up. Like there's an argument to be made that if you create a product, like this is why like it was frustrating for me with the Red Sox. I'm like, if you spend money, Boston shows up. Like it's not a hard formula. And if you're banging out 38,000 people a night, plus merchandise, plus food, and all of these other kinds of things, you're going to win in the long term. It's a smarter move to spend the money and be competitive than it is to not spend the money and say we can't afford it.
Okay, but how do you rationalize there's we want to make money ego, and then there's we want to win championships ego.
Hmm.
So if I'm a big market team and I want to win championships, I don't want the cap because I just want the number of banners to grow. I care about making money, but I care more about winning championships. Let's take a look at the Dodgers, right? So
Hmm.
spend it and we win, spend it and we win, spend it and we
Yeah.
win. And then for someone to say, hey, listen, it's better. You'll make more money, we have more butts in seats if we put a cap in place. Now I'm a Dodgers, I go, but you don't get me. My job is to win championships and I'll make money anyway. Or I'll make money and win championships. I don't want to limit myself winning championships. My
Yeah.
goal is to win.
I think every individual team would look at that and say that. But if you were to say to the Dodgers, okay, so you won 5 World Series in a row, like, do you think people are going to start tuning out?
Let's say they do go down with that premise.
Yeah.
I'm still winning championships, and that's
Yeah.
is my primary motivator. So
Yeah.
I don't care that they tune out. I've
So
got banners on the wall.
we're back to the tragedy of the commons thing, right?
Yeah,
Because if one entity defects, then the deer escapes and everybody loses, right? So it has to be a collective mindset, and that's a strange way to think about it. But again, the NFL took that way of thinking. It doesn't mean that they fully change the competitive nature of things, but they recognize that we have to compete and we need a system that enables everybody to compete.
yeah,
Like that is the difference. And if Major League Baseball doesn't say that, over time it will continue to degenerate and it will, people will, I mean, and it is exceedingly strong. Baseball is very, very popular in Japan and Korea and in Latin American countries and things like that. But you're certainly not going to grow it globally if beyond that,
yeah.
if you don't make a change.
Right.
So,
But I don't, I with the history of baseball, I, I'm not optimistic. I'm contrary. I just think these guys are going to negotiate the way they always have negotiated. It's going to be win lose. It's going to be ugly,
it might
and
be. Yeah.
I don't I don't see a lot of creative thinking, and I hope I'm totally wrong. I'm just not optimistic that brighter minds will prevail, if you will. So,
But it may be that the lockout is what forces, I mean, we know that a BATNA and a painful BATNA for each side. I mean, I think the owners realize that they're at a place where like something has to change, and their only real
Who's more
leverage is a
likely to lock
lockout.
out who?
What's that?
Who's more likely to lock out who? Will the owners lock the players out, or will the players refuse to play?
I think the owners will lock the players out because they don't have any real leverage because the Players Association is so strong. The only tool they really have, if the Players Association isn't going to negotiate and try to come up with something differently, the only thing they've got is a lockout.
Okay.
You know? So I don't think it's coming from the players, because if the players strike, they're the ones who ultimately lose out. Like the billionaire team owners are still going to figure out how to, manage their finances fairly well.
Yeah.
So I don't see the players striking. I think, it's much more likely that the owners say we have to change, we have to do things differently. Like if we have to scrap this season to make that point, maybe we do. I don't know. The 84 lockout was a disaster, and it took baseball quite a while to come back.
Right.
So,
All right. Well, let's wrap up this episode, and we'll continue to follow this one as it evolves, as like we have the Iranian one as well.
Yep.
So with that, gentlemen, I want to thank you again for your time. It's been a pleasure as always, and
Yep.
we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, guys.
All right, guys.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.